Talk about your vision for the MAHA movement as it pertains to cancer.
Well, you can imagine, as a lifelong Republican and a lifelong, many years of support for Donald Trump, I did not want to like Robert Kennedy. He had said some mean things, but after he endorsed, one of the leaders of the campaign said to me, well, why don't you go and help him? He wants to be involved in the health department. Maybe he wants to be HHS secretary. You're the only one. I was one of the guys on the policy group, and I was doing health policy. They said, go and talk to him. You've been to HHS. You can tell him about, maybe he wants to start like an Operation Warp Speed. Maybe he wants to be secretary. Maybe he wants to be an assistant to the president. He didn't know. And so I actually moved in with Bobby Kennedy and his wife, Cheryl. They had rented Dr. Oz's house in Palm Beach to be close to Mar-a-Lago and go to meetings. And I moved in with them for several days. It was a profound experience for me, because I went in there thinking, boy, I'm not going to like this guy. And within a day, I understood that he was someone to really be admired. The Bobby Kennedy is unique in Washington, and that makes it difficult for Bobby. I discovered one of the things that made me like him is he's physically unable to lie. And honestly, we were talking about things where I was saying, well, I'll say it this way. He says, Michael, I can't do that. I don't lie. Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing for America. But it's terrible for Bobby Kennedy.
There's an innocence about him, a sense of wonder about the world that, as you said, keeps him from feeling he can lie, and as you also said, makes him a PR handler's nightmare.
It is, but at the same time, he had conversations with me about, and he ended up landing on HHS secretary. But he's like, how do I impact children? He says the chronic disease problem for the children of America is he says it keeps him up at night, and he wakes up every morning praying that he can do something. And I realized he wasn't lying to me, and so we talked about it. And it's interesting because Dr. Oz has a house on the beach there in Palm Beach, like 10 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms, and it was like, I don't know, what do you call it? Big Brother, that TV show. Because all of Bobby's people are there, a bunch of doctors, they each have a bedroom. It's like Big Brother with hippies, and it was just a really wonderful experience. And I was allergic to chemo. It was a terrible experience. I went into it blew out my hearing. I have what some doctors tell me is a 9 or a 10 out of 10 tinnitus. It changes your life completely. Yeah. But one thing it does is it doesn't let you sleep. And so I wake up every day at 4 a.m. I've adjusted my life to deal with that. But one of the things I had to do on Palm Beach was get up and go downstairs, because I'm not going to lay in bed and stare at the ceiling. So I'm in Bobby's rental house. I'm down at the table looking out at the ocean, having a coffee by myself before sunrise. And the next person to get up, of course, is Bobby, because he's an early riser. And we would talk for a little while. But each of the doctors and the hippies would get up and come down, and I'd be at the table like I've been there all night. And one day, one of the guys said to me, he got up. He wasn't one of the early risers. and he came down. Clearly, he had gotten up to talk to me. He said, Michael, what is wrong? I said, what do you mean? He says, you're yellow. He's like, there's something wrong. What is wrong? Well, for 7 months, I was pretty sure my cancer was back. I had believed that somehow or another, because of my Google, medical degree, I believed that my throat cancer had gone to my prostate, and it had turned, it was going bad. And I didn't want to go through cancer treatments again, so I didn't tell anyone. And I was just feeling worse and worse. And before I went to Bobby's house, my wife pulled me aside and she said, what is wrong with you? You're falling apart. And I told her, I said, I think my cancer is back. She said, well, what are you doing? What do you do? Have you seen a doctor? I said, no, I don't want to. And she said, do something for me. So she had me sign up for this website where you pay a bunch of money and they do 100 different blood tests on you. They actually take like a gallon, I signed up for it, and then I got in the car and I went to Bobby's house. And then 4 days later, this fellow wakes up and comes down to the table. He says, what's wrong with you? And as a doctor, and I said, I think my cancer is back. And he said, what are you doing about it? And I said, nothing. I just really want it to take me. I can't do it again. And he said, don't do that. He said, do something. What are you doing? I said, did you tell your wife? I said, I told her, Sunday. And he said, what did you do? And I said, I signed up for this website, right? And Mark, it's funny. He looked at me and said, what's the name of the website? I said, functionhealth.com. And he said, that's my website. It was Dr. Mark Hyman.
Yeah.
And Dr. Hyman said, did you take your blood test yet? I said, no. He said, stand by. And he texted somebody. And I got my blood test that day in Palm Beach.
And what was the diagnosis?
Well, I'll tell you, I went home because Bobby was later that day picked for HHS. And I said goodbye so he could celebrate with his people. And I went home and Mark called me 3-4 days later. No, a couple days later. And he said, Michael, I didn't give you a cancer panel, but it looks to me like you got a kidney stone the size of Jupiter. He said, because I don't know, blood in my urine or whatever, the way and he said, got to get a scan. He hooked me up with a scan. Sure enough, I had a nearly 2-centimeter kidney stone, and it was stuck in my kidney. And if I had sat there with my Google MD and thought it was cancer, I might have had a failed kidney and really had a problem. I had surgery during the inauguration, and I'm fine. It wasn't cancer, Mark. It was a kidney stone.
Which is about the most painful thing out there, having had one, I can say, in your sense, bigger than mine was. Tell us about your vision now for MAHA and for cancer. What are they doing? What should they be doing? How much hope should people have about this administration's ability, not just for kids, but for everybody fighting cancer?
Yeah, hope is the key, right? Because what happened to me is I lost it. I went through, and I would go every day waiting in the waiting room to go get my head blasted with radiation. And there were these 3 children there that were there every day. When I went there, they were there, and they were sitting in chairs with me. 3-4 days later, they were in gurneys. A week after that, they were unresponsive to me. And when I said hello, because I remember their names. Yeah. And then they didn't show up again. And I knew they had died. And I thought to myself, after my allergy to chemo, I thought, first of all, these children should not be getting cancer. They're too darn young. And by the way, what if they're allergic to chemo? The toxins they put in your body to heal you, I have to deal with this for 20 years. They'd have to deal with it for 70. It's unbearable. These poor kids. And Bobby got me focused on childhood cancer. And I believe the administration through MAHA is absolutely focused on this troubling trend that cancer is increasingly striking younger and younger people. And Bobby and the president are completely focused on young people in this first stage of MAHA. They're attacking childhood chronic disease, and cancer is the #1 chronic disease killer of children. These early onset cancers are growing at a rate that is frightening doctors. And it's growing at a rate that's incomparable to any other nation in the world. So what I believe, because you can imagine I talk to people in the administration, and I'm very interested in this, because I believe MAHA cancer can change everything. Chemotherapy, the chemo that they gave to me hasn't been really changed since 1890. You believe that? 1890. Yeah. And they're treating children with ancient medicines when there are other ways to treat them. We need to discover them. But more importantly, you see the president and his team very focused on artificial intelligence. And there's a reason for this in the health industry, in public health. And in childhood cancer, you can use AI to, number one, using the data we have buckets and buckets of data over history, and you can put it into AI, and within half an hour, you can have answers to what is causing some of this. And you can work with children who have the disease to figure out the environmental factors. Maybe it's pesticides, maybe it's food, as what's driving this cancer. With artificial intelligence and pushing diagnosis and research into younger ages, we have a spike in cancer in 20 and 30-year-olds. We know that a lot of that came from their childhood. And also, we don't discover it because, Mark, nobody even asks you about cancer at the doctor until you're 40. Right? We made to make it younger. I believe that the president and Bobby Kennedy are completely focused on this.
Here's a question for you. You got to think about this. Is the continued divide between the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve putting us all potentially behind the curve again? Can the Fed take the right action at the right time? Or are we all going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? And what would that mean for your savings? Consider then diversifying with gold through the folks at Birch Gold Group. For decades now, gold has been viewed as a safe haven whenever there's economic stagnation, global uncertainty, or high inflation. Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings right into gold. If you've got an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Another option, buy some gold to keep in your safe. But first, before you make that choice, get some education. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit about gold. Just text the word NEXT to the number 989898. Again, text the word NEXT to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Federal Reserve can't stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead of the curve for yourself.